So we're going weiter in Otzros Chaim. From weiter in Otzros Chaim. And we're going to see what happens after the Tzimtzum. Right? We spoke last week about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Tzimtzum himself. He contracted himself from the center so as to create the shape of the eventual space of existence. One thing that we're not going to touch upon, but we are going to touch upon, because it's not written in Otzros Chaim, but it's hinted to in Eitz Chaim and in Mavos Sha'arim and the different writings of the Ari, is that after the Tzimtzum, it was not a vacant space. This we already kind of accepted. But what was there? What was it that became this Chalal HaPanui? And this is what's referred to as the Reshimu, the Ohr Ein Sof, the trace of the infinite light that remained within existence even after HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracted his infinite light. The Reshimu fills the Chalal HaPanui, that empty space. The empty space might itself even just be the Reshimu itself. The empty space is the trace. I'm not going to go into that mahalach right now. But this empty, voided space, this Chalal HaPanui, is not empty because it's filled with the trace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light. It's a klal gadol, a big principle that when holiness expresses itself and it eventually retreats back to its source, it leaves an irreducible trace that is never gone, always there. The place in which spiritual light expressed itself will never be the same. It now holds an impression or an engraving of the infinite light. So everything that is going to be taking place after the departure of the infinite light is actually just taking place within the trace, the Reshimu, of that infinite light that has departed. So here the Arizal is giving us a very fundamental differentiation between the infinite light prior to Tzimtzum and the trace of the infinite light after the Tzimtzum. But in spite of that very fundamental distinction and cut, we're going to come to find that they're ultimately still the same exact thing. Because you cannot differentiate the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The removal of the infinite light cannot mean that the place that the infinite light was is no longer going to have the infinite light. The infinite light, once it expresses itself there, what becomes clear is that everything is Elokus. And when it becomes clear that everything is Elokus, so you can't undo that by simply putting a sheath or a divider back on top of it. The truth has been revealed. All that exists is Elokus, Ohr Ein Sof. And so when Ohr Ein Sof removes itself, even in its apparent absence, we also know that it's just all Elokus. All of it is godliness. This is the principle behind Tzimtzum in a Kapshuto. That Tzimtzum is not literal because the concept of a literal Tzimtzum is an impossibility. It's not a possibility. It's an impossibility. Within the frequency of our contemplation and our grasp and the rules and the regulations that the tzaddikim have set up for us, it is axiomatically impossible to conceive of an actual void in existence. There's no emptiness whatsoever. Not only does nature abhor a vacuum, not only has quantum come to teach us the fractalized nature of existence, but on a spiritual level, the infinite light does not disappear. Phrased differently, when you touch an aspect of infinite light, no matter how minimal the remainder is, it's still infinite light when you dig down deep into it. So nothing really changes. Everybody with me so far? Nothing changes. So if nothing actually changes, then what's changing, right? So we have the infinite light and then the separation, the removal of that infinite light. What we're saying is that even that void that remains after the Tzimtzum also continues to hold a trace of the infinite light. And trace or not trace, full measure or half measure, infinite light is infinite light. You can't demarcate boundaries within infinitude. So we're back at the starting point where the infinite light is still present even after its departure. So what changes that now enables us to enter into the conversation of levels and differentiation? The secret is the Reshimu. That very well that the Reshimu is the same infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that existed prior to the Tzimtzum. In fact, it might even be a more potent expression of divine light that is capable of coming into limitation, which reveals a source rooted far above unlimitedness. But even though that Reshimu, the trace of the infinite light, is the infinite light, it now has boundaries to it. It's now somehow, some way, the miracle of the infinite light expressing itself in a bounded way. That's the secret of the Reshimu. The original Kli, the original instantiation of a limitation, which is nothing other than a form or a shape being given to that which is shapeless. How is it possible that there can be a shape to the shapeless? The Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum reveals this radical capacity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to reveal himself by way of the Reshimu. Everybody with me? Yes, exactly correct, right? It's the removal or the concealment of the capacity of God to reveal himself without limitation, which at the very same moment is the revelation of Hashem's capacity to reveal himself by way of limitation. Meaning we sense them as two separate movements, two separate tunuos, but they're one and the same. Ha-he'elem ihu hagilui. The concealment is revelation. What does that mean? The concealment of the limitlessness is in and of itself the revelation of the capacity towards limit. Is it a lower quality or? So here we have to. So here I appreciate you asking that, and the question is this Reshimu, this trace of infinite light that remains in this Chalal HaPanui, is it of an inferior quality, so to speak, than the saturating light of infinitude from prior to existence? So here we're going to have to go into the Mittler Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, because he, as I understand his formulations of the Reshimu, which is based on all the previous Mekubalim, but he kind of clarifies, and then the Rebbe Rashab in Ayin Beis, in the Hemshech Ayin Beis is where the Rebbe Rashab really brings this notion of the Nekudas HaReshimu, this dot of the trace of infinite light that remains after the departure and what it actually is. Externally speaking, Avada, it appears to be inferior because it's not the all-encompassing infinite light anymore. It's measured, it's limited, it's deficient in terms of its quantity. But what's really happening when we speak about the Reshimu is that it's not that Hashem left and now what remains is a trace. Hashem folded himself, so to speak, into that trace. That the Reshimu, this dot of a trace that remains after the departure of the fulfilling content, it appears to just be the nothing that remains after everything has been taken away. The truth of the matter is that it's everything condensed into the innermost point. Tzimtzum is the enfolding of all of the periphery into the innermost center point that is without spatial coordinates. It's just a point. Does that make sense what I'm saying now? On an external level, the Reshimu is existence that is no longer animated or saturated by the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Something has changed. Hashem has removed himself, so to speak, and in its place rests the possibility of shape and being. From that perspective, the Reshimu is Chalal HaPanui. It appears to be a vacant space. But from an inner perspective of what's actually happening in the mechanism of the Reshimu, it's that what Hashem wants to do is he wants to reveal himself even more. Dir b'tachtonim. And so we have to remove the endless light that prevents anything else from taking shape. But you can't take it away, so you fold it in, you push it into this primordial point at the center. And if that center point of the Reshimu is now holding all of this infinite light, then clearly it's rooted in a place far greater than the measure of the infinite light before the Tzimtzum.
Like the concept
of a zip file, mashu kaze. It's everything condensed into one. It's almost like When it's folded in on itself, it has pure potential, all potential, endless potential of anything that could possibly exist, but it's not actualized in any way, shape, or form. But if you were to unfold it back to its unlimitedness, you would come to find all possible iterations that will be revealed afterwards. The Reshimu, as we're going to see, is only going to be activated by the return of the Kav Ohr Ein Sof back into the Halal, which is not what we're holding at yet. But so the Reshimu is standing in a latent state of potency that has everything, but it's also appearing and presenting itself as absolutely nothing.
Is it Ohr Ein Sof folded in, or is it the Koach of the wool, the Bittul wool that's folded in?
It's a higher capacity that's folded in, right? When it was just the infinite light prior to the existence of the world, that's ledugmo, lemashal, lahavdil, alfei abdalos, a person who's able to function behisrachvus, right? I'm happy when I have everything. I'm happy when I have what I need. I'm happy when I have, the food that I need, the cash that I need. But when things are not the way that I need them to be, I'm incapable of finding happiness. I'm incapable of finding joy. Ohr Ein Sof kodem Tzimtzum is I have everything that I need. The Reshimu after the Tzimtzum seems to be that I no longer have everything that I need. But what reveals a deeper capacity within the individual's neshama? Their ability to be joyous when they have everything that they need, or their ability to find some semblance of joy even in the absence of what they need. Obviously, the ability to be joyous when I don't have what I think I need reveals a far greater capacity than just being joyous when I have everything that I need. Does that metaphor make sense so far? Yeah. Hashem's ability to reveal himself b'derech Ohr Ein Sof is Hashem's capacity of revelation. And that's somewhat obvious. God is limitless. He can express himself in limitless nature. The bigger chiddush, the novelty, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could withhold himself. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu could impose some sort of limitation upon himself, so to speak, that allows for the opposite of his infinite presence to emerge into appearance. That, when we come to realize that the opposite of Hashem is also Hashem, that's going to be a far greater revelation than just Hashem revealing himself in infinitude. To quote the Rebbe Rashab, the Koach HaMa'atzor, the capacity of withholding, is a far more essential quality than the quality of expression and revelation. We see this in a very strange statement in Chazal, that Mi kamoicha be'ilim Hashem. Who is like you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Who is like you amongst the gods? And Chazal, in their unimaginable wisdom, decide to misread that pasuk. Don't read it, who is like God amongst the other gods of the world, but who is like God amongst the silent ones, Elim. And that God himself is then referred to as one who is silent. One who is silent. Where his strength comes from is his ability to tolerate the opposite. That there's the enemies of the Jewish people who are being maraked in the Heichal, that are dancing in the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the Churban. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shoitek, Chaviyachal. Hashem doesn't say anything. He holds back. That capacity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to hold back, the Koach HaMa'atzor, to not reveal himself in full measure, this willingness, so to say, velo yoter, not farther, that reveals a far more essential quality than the capacity of revelation. Revelation flows forth like water. Water flows. If you have a clear source, water will flow endlessly. But to create limitation, that's going against the natural flow. The Chazon Ish Zchus Yagan Aleinu writes in his Igros that really there's no list of negative character traits, nor is there a list of positive character traits. There's only one general trait. The root source of all negative character traits is what he describes as haznachas hachayim lezerem hativi, the abandonment of life to the natural proclivity of self. And there's no greater human quality than the capacity to overcome one's desires. Rav Hutner's Zchus Yagan Aleinu quotes from the Chazon Ish's letters, and he refers to him as Echad Mechachmei ha'avoda u'balei ha'yisurin b'dorenu, I think is the way he describes it, writes that Ein tam ha'oineg ela misha hiskaber al yitzro v'netzcho. that one has not enjoyed the true taste of pleasure other than one who has overcome their desires and been victorious. What are you talking about? How can that be possible? Tainug is expression. Pleasure is experience. Saying yes to something. But what the Chazon Ish is revealing is really, it's the derech of the Gra, but it's also the derech of the Baal Shem Tov, that in the no-saying, in the setting of the limit, in the imposition of a limit that holds back the natural flow, what we're revealing is the capacity of the opposite to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's a far greater strength than pure expression. Tainug to me, the eno tainug, exactly. Right? Obviously, the real tainug is going to be then experiencing the light, but without the no-saying, without the setting of limitation, so then it's just inundation, it's mabul. It's a mabul. And so the Reshimu, at its core, is revelatory of an even more essential capacity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol than the revelation of his infinite light. Because it's his capacity to be mitzamsem himself Kavyachol and still be fundamentally infinite. This is the secret of the Reshimu.
Is some of the Ohr Ein Sof not also the massive layers of Hester, slabs that goes put
Avada. But the whole, meaning certainly the infinite light of HaKadosh.
It's also covered. I mean, that's how it's described in
What? No, there's many metaphors that we can look at in terms of how the Tzimtzum is working and what it's doing to the infinite light. But ultimately, because Tzimtzum ain't a kipshuto and Tzimtzum is not literal, we have to ultimately come to the recognition that Tzimtzum doesn't actually do anything to the presence of the infinite essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so any level of concealment or hiding is going to have to concomitantly be a moment of revelation. Our job is to be the Dorshe Reshumos, something we was talking about today. To be Dorshe Reshumos means to dig into why is this significant? Again, to bring it back to Avodah. The world is empty. The world is a halal hapanui, like we said. The world is a vacant space. God is not apparently present in reality. The world is not saturated with the absolute revelation of the infinite light. The tzaddikim can be zoichet to this, but for Rov Am Hadras Melech, right? Rov Am, or I can only speak for myself, but the world appears to be a separate thing, right? And Achein Atakel Mastater, and Metzias appears to be Metzias. So, on the way I understand the Arizal, he's coming to answer a very fundamental therapeutic question. How is one meant to make sense out of an existence that appears to be empty? How is one meant to live with the joy and the self-abandonment and comfort of an infinite God if one lives in a finite world? That's the question. When Hashem is invisible to one degree or another, how do you live as if he's visible, and how do you make him visible? And this is the question of absence. What does the absence of God mean? What does the Arizal is not saying like you're wrong about the absence of God. Why would you ever think that God has absence himself? The Tzimtzum is like directly saying the first act that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did is absence himself. To one degree or another, he made space. So that can be the root of all sorts of existential, destruction. One can come to a, God forbid, mistaken place of thinking that the world is devoid of the animating light of Hashem. So comes along the Arizal to teach us that Hashem is still here. Hashem is still equally here. But then we have the same problem of we're back to nothingness. So the system of the Arizal is the overlaying of a system, of an organized system of checks and balances with laws of dynamics that enable the infinite light of Hashem to continue to reveal itself while still enabling finite existence to operate in its sense of independence. For both to be true at once. Everybody with me on this? This is the tachlis. For both to be true at once. Not just echad, but echad shehu shtayim. This is the tachlis of creation. To go from echad to the secret of echad shehu shtayim. To go from infinite light prior to the creation of the world into the processes of after the creation of the world, and to reveal the infinite light there as well, and to be ma'ached echad be'echad, kegavna dilay. That's the secret of unity. So, but are we in absence or are we not in absence? This is what the secret of the Reshimu comes to explain to us. that from our vantage point of the chitzonius of the Reshimu, the infinite light has removed itself, and all that exists is the Chalal HaPanui. And Chalal HaPanui, think about it, like the Nefesh HaChaim says, Chilul Hashem is from the language of Chalal, the notion that God is absent from a place. Chalal means a dead body. Libi, libi, al chalaloseim, as we scream out in Nachem. Libi, libi, right? The chalalim in this world are unbearable if you conceive them as actual tzimtzumim. So the secret of the Reshimu externally is that there's a halal. There's a void here, and I have to fill that void with light. But the pnimius of the Reshimu is that there's no void whatsoever. All that exists is the all-animating, saturating light of Hashem. And this is what the Ari said in Parsha Shoftim, on if you find somebody a halal ba'adama, you find the halal ba'adama, and he says you find the void in this world, which expresses itself in disaster, death, all of the worst symptoms imaginable. You have to realize that the truth of the matter is that halal is gematria chaim. It's the same gematria as life. Life, the fullness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression. So this has a direct import on how we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our job is to, first and foremost, see the world as the external Reshimu of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The trace of Hashem's infinite light. I live in the halal of the Tzimtzum, and my job is to draw the light of the Kav down into it through Torah and mitzvos, through working on myself and fixing the world. But from the pnimius of the Reshimu, be'emes, Ohr Ein Sof is equally right here as it always has been. It's contained within all things. And the Reshimu reveals that the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has never left. Everything else seems to have fallen apart, but the one thing that remains is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then, I'm already where I need to be. Chitzonius HaReshimu, I have to do so much work to get to where I need to be. From the pnimius of the Reshimu, I'm already exactly where I need to be. Does that make sense, Chevra? Question?
Yeah, how could it be conceivable that there be, if Tzimtzum is Kipshutai, that there is a halal, when nothing would exist if there was a halal? Our whole existence is
Well, that's why, meaning, right, the Tzimtzum shel lav kipshuto argument is not an argument, meaning there is no one from the perspective of Rabbeinu or Shiva Sayamim, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, in the path of the Baal Shem Tov and all of his Talmidim and all of the Gevaldikim Mikubalim and all of the Tzadikim, barring one sugya of one tzaddik and one mechaber that leaves room for understanding things differently, which obviously in the end is also going to be contained within what we're saying. That's the Mishnah's Chasidim, Rav Emanuel Chayrechi, in his Sefer Yosher Levav. But the psak is that Tzimtzum is lav kipshuto. That's the secret, that there can be no, it's an impossibility, there can be no void. There can be no absence. Kol zman that am imani kan hakol kan. Imani kan hakol kan. If the spark of light...
Chaim Lozner is saying that it's also to think from Mitzidai, how there's been no change since the creation, like how...
Meaning, okay, so you're saying, so I want to address this question, right? So there's the question of contemplating the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and its never non-existent nature, meaning it's always present, always, hoivet tmidi, all that exists, ein oid milvado, this consciousness. So, what we're referring to as chitzonius of the Reshimu, which is like the concealment of divine light and then the eventual unfolding of worlds and levels, let's call that mitzidenu, from our perspective. And mitzido yisparach is going to be from his perspective, which is prior to the tzimtzum. Now what's fundamental here is that any notion of mitzido, from his perspective, is only the mitzido of mitzidenu. It's only our perspective of his perspective. But with regards to mitzido ha'amiti, his perspective, so to speak, we have no access whatsoever, and everything that we're ever talking about is mitzidenu. All of the shock absorbers that one possibly needs for faith remaining the healthiest and only option are built into the secrets of Pnimius HaTorah. Because it's all mitzidenu. There's a mitzidenu. How do we contemplate this ever-present nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light? So here we do taka have a Machlokes l'shem shamayim. between, let's call it, the Beis Medrash of the Vilna Gaon and the Beis Medrash of the Baal Shem Tov. But ultimately, it's the Machlokes between Chachma and Bina, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, and it's expressed most in Shar Yichud ve'Emunah and Shar Gimel in Nefesh HaChaim. That the Nefesh HaChaim is clearly stating that there is a prohibition of contemplating this upper perspective of divine nothingness being revealed everywhere for various reasons, one of which, of the most significant one, is that if I come to contemplate the infinite presence of God at all times and not in all things, but around all things and as the base of all things, so then I'm obviously going to come to soften my grip on Avodas Hashem and Torah and Mitzvos and this notion of Schar and Onesh and Bechira, because Bechira is motivated by my wanting to come closer and closer. But if I'm perpetually downloading the fact that I'm as close as I can ever possibly be, so then theoretically that would diminish my willingness to do more. Obviously that's a mistaken perspective, because we know we're never finished. And any grasp of Ohr Ein Sof that we actually have is only a minuscule drop in relationship to that which has not been revealed yet. But there was always the chashash that if you contemplate the infinite light, mitzido of mitzidenu, too much, it will come to lead to either theological issues of, pantheism, of identifying existence as God rather than seeing existence as existing within God, so to speak. And so there was a number of reasons of not doing it. The Tanya Kadisha and the Baal Shem Tov and the Talmidei HaMagid had a different derech. They felt that it was totally permitted to contemplate these things. This was the tachlis of creation. This was medicine, right? How are you going to live if you're not contemplating the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Tzimtzum Eina Kipshuto? So the way that Rav Yitzchak is miyashev this, and obviously it's a far greater sugya, but this is like a sound bite that I think really captures the Nakuda, and it's not unlike a svara of Rav Soloveitchik in the Machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban and the D'oraisa nature of Tefillah. That even the Nefesh HaChaim in Shar Gimel will say that in moments of sakana, in moments of tsar, that one should contemplate Eino and Milvado to such a degree that they literally come to a place of Bittul b'mitzias and Bittul b'hechlet, that existence stops being something separate and apart from God, and all that exists is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ad kedei kach that yispardu kol plei aven, and Eino and Milvado ksiv, afilu b'kshafim, and the Brisker Rav, in the Zman HaZa'am, in the years of the war, he was able to contemplate this segula of the Nefesh HaChaim and walk past Nazis and not be seen. Right? This is the level of what the Nefesh HaChaim understood was the capacity of the contemplation of infinite light. Everybody with me on this? But we see that the Tanai is that it's a Siman Sakana. You have to be in a matzav of Sakanas Nefashos in order to call upon this potent level of divine revelation. Says the Rebbe, for a chassid, right, for someone in the path of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, consciousness of separation is already the sakanas nefashos. It's sakanas nefashos, and therefore I have to contemplate this at every second, because when am I not in the state of sakanas nefashos? And so, kuli amulo pligi, that one can contemplate the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the zman of sakana, when they need to reboot the whole mitzias. You have to reach all the way up to the top and flip the whole thing in its root and see that yeshin yan sheyitapecha kol letova. There is a secret that transforms everything into good. And what's that secret? It's Tzimtzum Eina Kipshuto. Hashem tzelcha yad yaminecha. Tzelcha is Tzimtzum lav Kipshuto. The more I live with Tzimtzum lav Kipshuto, the more I awaken that reality of Tzimtzum lav Kipshuto. The Lubavitcher Rebbe Sklusa Ganalinu writes, he says, even though Tzimtzum Kipshuto is not a real thing, the svara is real. Which means that you can be stuck in that concept your whole life and you can live within that frequency. Your limitation of God in your mind says nothing about the actual limitation of God. So Nebuch, a person can live stuck within the svara of Tzimtzum Kipshuto. But the more we live with the Tzimtzum Eina Kipshuto, the more we awaken Tzimtzum Eina Kipshuto, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mamtik l'dinim for us. And so kuli amalo pligi that we have to contemplate this. But the Baal Shem Tov revealed an existential urgency of the neshama any moment that it's in this world, and the only medicine is the jewel of the king's crown, which is Or HaYichud, the light of Yichud. So the Baal Shem Tov changed it. See this Machlokes in terms of tefillah, that the Rambam paskins that tefillah is d'oraisa. The Ramban paskins that tefillah is only d'oraisa in a time of sakana. And the way Rav Soloveitchik explains it is that if you understand the Rambam, every moment of existence is Zman Sakana, because you feel separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
I heard Hashem the Emunah that Baal Tanya and Chaim Lashner were new neshamas.
I don't know him. I don't know. It could be. I've seen. I don't know. I think that there's a shmua that I once read about the Baal Tanya and speaking about neshamos chadashos, but I don't know. I believe that they're the biggest souls in the world, meaning the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh is from Yechidei Hadoros. Rabbi Nachman is Yechidei Hadoros. Baal Tanya is the Tzadikei Yisraelim. But Avada, these were new Giluyim. Rabbi Nachman writes that before the Tzaddik Emes is Megala his teachings, it's possible to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu without them. After the Tzaddik Emes is Megala his teachings in the world, it's now impossible to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu without them. So they're quantum shifts, right? They're these cosmic shifts in reality, that new information comes to light, and the whole way of coping with reality is now different. It's not different. The Chidah brings us down in Shem HaGadolim. The path of tshuva before the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh was very different than the path of tshuva after the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. What time is it, Chava? 10 to. So let's get a few words of Otzros Chaim in. Well, no, taka not. I think we're talking about the Reshimu tonight. We're talking about the Reshimu tonight, and I'm not gonna, quickly jump into the Igulim and the shape of existence and the all-inclusive shape of existence. But suffice it to say that the Reshimu, the trace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is the hinge upon what the system is maintaining itself. The Reshimu is the revelation that the divine light has never actually left. Ki'ilu lo yatsa. As if nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. Kim'at, nothing ever happened. There was no actual Yitzia. And it's not, yeah.
So it's comparable to a child who's separated for his parent. The parent's not healthy. It's just that the parent is holding back from helping the child to learn in such a situation rather than the parent not being there at all.
So it's an amazing question, right? The question is, now let's apply this, meaning the metaphor is certainly correct. The Baal Shem Tov uses this metaphor that the parent conceals himself from the child so that the child will yearn. But the prerequisite is that first the parent reveals himself fully to the child. Then the parent distances themselves so that the child can cultivate the yearning desire to uncover an even deeper level of the parent's presence. That, like we said, even in the parent's absence, they were present. But all of this is the svara of describing, by way of metaphor, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the world. But the moment we begin to apply this to kind of theodicies and an actual way of treating human suffering as it expresses itself within the frequency of the worlds of separation, which exist because Hashem wills them into existence at every moment. They would cease to exist the moment that Hashem stopped, even for the slightest notion of a moment. But as long as the worlds of separation exist and suffering exists, we cannot allow the ideas to kind of whitewash human experience and whitewash the experience of being a subject in separation. The Baal Shem Tov came along and taught us that the cure towards that is Bittul, right? The more you feel yourself as something separate, the more you're going to experience the potency and the intensity of separation. The more Bittul you experience, the more you become a kli that can hold that light of Tainug and Ratzon and Emunah and well-being and Menuchas HaNefesh. But the Tzadikim Amitim and the Tzadikim Nistarim, I understand that the Torah can be said about everything except the suffering of another Yid. We can't give Torah upon the suffering of another Yid. And this is not even like a response to your question. I'm just, the bringing up like a child who's suffering in a metaphor is a very important point to focus, because it's not meant to whitewash the experience or the existence of the worlds of separation. the Ramchal and all of the tzaddikim teach us, the more we contemplate divine presence, the more pleasant reality will be. It is the medicine. It is the answer. If a person is looking for relief in any way, the answer, Eitzasahu Emunah. Eitzasahu Emunah. Eitzasahu Emunah. More Emunah. More Sha'ashui Emunah. More pleasure of coming to realize that, wow, God is here also. Here also. Here also. Every moment of here also, question mark, and then here also, period. That's the tnua, that's the dance. The here also, question mark, is the man, is the awakening of where are you, Hashem? Where am I going to find you? I don't see you, I don't feel you, I don't know you. That's the question marks of existence. That's the bina, the Ohr Ein Sof, the awakening from below. But then immediately, almost immediately, in the next moment, there's the answer of here also. And that is the revelation of Hashem's light in our lives. And so we're always growing in the frequencies in which we understand Hashem. And the tzaddikim medicalize this. They give us the permission to heal based on these teachings, but it's not, but a person has to know, and the tzaddikim know, only the tzaddikim know, how to treat the worlds of separation in a real way when there's human suffering involved and when there's an issue involved and when it comes to geula, but at the same moment to be moichik reality and to erase reality. Right? Like they asked the Chazon Ish, like, how do you stand up at the end of your day after hearing all of the tsaros of Klal Yisrael? And the Chazon Ish said that all of those tsaros go to a very, very deep place, but there's an even deeper place where they don't go. So we can say that, that's the Nakuda of Ohr Ein Sof, Kodem Tzimtzum, where the tsaros of Klal Yisrael, they don't go there. But in every other level of concealment, they do go there. And so the avodah is to be mamtik the dinim. The avodah is to see the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere. But when it comes to the suffering of another yid, and we're yidden also, and so that includes our suffering, that I forget which tzaddik it is, someone else will know, but there was a tzaddik, someone came to a tzaddik and said, no, you say your Torah says you can learn something from anybody, and everything is meaningful. So then, what can you learn from a kofar, from someone who denies the existence of God? What's the nitzatz hatov in that? And the answer is that when somebody is in front of you with a particular need, right, and they need eitzah or help on something, you have to almost act as if Hashem is not going to take care of this person's problem. I have to take care of this person's problem. For a moment, I have to push God out of the scene, so to speak, so that I take the achrayus of another yid's pain. And that's meaning the Arizal wanted to bring geula. The Arizal was not a philosopher. The Arizal was light of Mashiach, and he was trying to bring geula. And that light of geula is expressed in the two revelations afterwards, which is the light of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the light of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and then ultimately, as I understand it, the light of the Nachal Levim Makar Chochma, which is our generation, where it's Chidush Kameinu Lo Haya Me'olam. There's never been a Chidush like us, because we're Dorshe Reshumos, we're searching out that infinite light. I apologize for not going into the text itself, but this is the Inyan.